Welcome to Filling You In, a dental podcast with A Squared, where dentist entrepreneurs and spouses, Dr. Anushka Gaglani and Dr. Abhishek Nagaraj, welcome industry experts and innovators to explore trends in business practices, patient care, career development, and what it takes to be successful in dentistry.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Filling You In. I am Dr. Abhishek Nagaraj.
And I'm Dr. Anushka Gaglani, collectively known as A Squared. One of the main reasons we started this podcast was to feature respected insiders in dentistry to help us all keep up with the latest trends, challenges, and opportunities. Our guest today is a perfect example of that expert voice. Beth Gaddis is editor-in-chief at Planet DDS, where she keeps a sharp eye on the sector and helps connect DSO leaders with the solutions they need to grow and thrive.
Before joining Planet DDS, Beth led marketing efforts for two large dental groups with hundreds of locations. Her career actually began in journalism, and she was a television news producer at the CBS affiliate in Boston during 9/11. Beth, thank you so much for joining us today. It's our honor.
It is such a pleasure to be here, and it's such a pleasure to see both of you again. Thanks for having me on.
100%. We'd like to dive in by getting to know, so that our audience can get to know you a little bit more. We always like to start out with your background and your career path. You've had a unique journey from producing news in Boston to leading marketing for fast-growing dental groups. How did that path lead you to Planet DDS?
You know, I just love telling people stories. And so I was a journalist for 16 years. I worked for several TV stations, as you mentioned, including the CBS affiliate in Boston. And then once I had my own kids, I kind of was looking for a career where I could maybe be at home when a hurricane was coming toward my house. I now live in Tampa, as opposed to working like a 20-hour day. And so I started putting out some feelers and was connected with a group in Tampa, a DSO that was growing from 125 locations to 180 locations, and they were growing their marketing team. So I was with them for almost 6 years, rose up to be their marketing director. Then I went to work for another group that had, at that point, about 300 locations and 88 brands, also in Florida and expanding across the country, and was with them. And so then I went into dental software and started working for a couple of different companies. And that led me to here at Planet DDS, where I just love taking all of the industry knowledge that I have, all of my journalism skills, and can really roll that all into telling stories about what challenges people are facing and how they can overcome them in the dental industry right now.
You know, I'm so curious how that experience was for you, going from, being in the industry you were in to dental. What was that like?
It was a big change, especially this was back in 2011. And so I had no knowledge of the dental industry other than, being a patient myself. And one of the first things that I did is I basically did ride along. So I went out with the district managers and visited practices for really the first 5 days and just really immersed myself in the culture and learned about all the challenges. And boy, there were so many challenges. I had no idea of what was going on behind the scenes. I had no idea how many patients were, no-showing or canceling their appointments. I had no idea about how all of the different systems that people had to be logging into, how many windows they had open in order to get the information that they needed to do their jobs effectively. And then the whole psychology of the patient journey and getting them to understand what's going on in their mouths and to accept treatment, that was a whole other side. And so I really just fell in love with it and creating all of those patient education materials, especially. That's what I did for the first, 9 years that I was in the industry, and really loved telling that story about the difference that it made and giving our teams the tools that they needed in order to help people understand why they needed the treatment, how they could afford the treatment, and how they could feel better about themselves.
You've had what we call a fascinating career. You've done so many cool things. Every time we look at you, it's like you're up to doing some really cool stuff. And Beth, you're one of those people that's constantly tracking trends in the industry. What's one trend that you see in dentistry right now that DSO leaders or dental groups just can't afford to ignore?
It's really about AI and automation. And that's really where Planet DDS also helps excel. So, for those of people who aren't familiar with us, we are a dental software company. So we are best known for Denticon practice management, Cloud9 ortho practice management, digital imaging solutions. And then we play really nicely with our revenue cycle management tools, patient communication. We have our own practice marketing branch. payment processing. So all of those things we're bringing into an ecosystem. We call it a dental operating system. And because we have so much access to so many data, we work with over 5,000 practices right now. We're able to really dive in and see what kind of trends are going on across the industry. So AI and automation, absolutely the biggest thing that's happening right now. And it is absolutely incredible to me just how quickly the technology is changing. And it's impacting everything that we see, from the patient journey, like how people want to be getting their information now. They want to be going online as opposed to calling the practice. So, how do you make it easy for when they're scheduling, that they're scheduling only for the blocks that you want, only for the procedures that you want, only for the providers that you want, and that all of that information is feeding in seamlessly into your practice management system. From there, now that they're on the schedule, how can we automate it so that the practice team members no longer have to be picking up the phone and calling the dental insurer in order to get verification? How can we make that automated so they can go with a click of a button? It is going out and looking at it automatically, keeping it up to date, refreshing every 5 minutes. So if you're adding people onto your schedule, it's picking those on up, getting that data, bringing it back into your practice management system, taking that off the plate of the people that are working. Once the patient is now in the office, they've done their digital forms in advance. That's all fed in automatically. Once again, no human interaction needed in order to have all that data flowing into your system. Now they're in the chair, and you can use the artificial intelligence with the x-rays in order to help the doctor with identifying where there might be problem areas that they want to take a little closer look at them. And really what I love AI for radiographs is the ability to show it to the patient and have that patient education piece. You just see their eyes light up when they can now see in color what's happening inside their mouth instead of looking at black and white x-rays. So every single step of the journey is really just adding that AI and automation into it. I think a huge area right now is with RCM. So within our systems, you have the claims that are ready to go out. We're automatically checking those against the payer rules to make sure that everything's attached before they're sent out so that we can reduce the number of rejections that might be happening. We don't want anything to be getting kicked back. We want to be going through clean the first time. Yeah. And then with 835s now, it's like digitizing those EOBs, digitizing that payment that's coming back in, being able to attach it automatically to the correct ledger. It is just amazing what is available now that wasn't available even 12 months ago.
Right on.
So
Right
true.
on.
The industry is moving so quickly. And we totally agree. One of the things that we're really focusing on as well is how do we get our teams at the practice level to focus on the patient experience instead of all of these other tasks that can take their time and detract from that.
In
Really
fact,
good
just the
points.
other day, Anushka and I were talking to our VP of Ops, Caitlin, about how the future is moving so fast that at the very minimum, as a leadership team, we've got to be really adept at using ChatGPT, even to be able to write some SOPs, right? Gone are those days where you have to sit and cram SOPs for like 10 hours. So at the very minimum, leaders and management teams have to adapt this really quickly. So that was super insightful, and it tracks.
Well, that's one of the biggest challenges I think people have in the dental industry, especially working with a lot of groups like we do, is that standardization, right? And having written SOPs, making sure that everyone is following the processes, making sure that it's easy, making sure that they're getting updated with all of the new, whether it's technology that you're putting into place, or new protocols that you're putting into place. And that is really, the number one challenge to scaling, I would say, that most groups have. And so absolutely ChatGPT can help with that, and setting the standards and including in this SOPs who's accountable for each metric is so critically important.
Really
on.
great points.
And other trends that we're seeing, we've just released the 2025 Dental Industry Outlook Report. And we were able to dive deep into our data. As I mentioned, we work with 5,000 practices. And there were some really cool things that came out of that. One is that, let me ask you, what do you think the percentage is of patients who reschedule their appointment?
20 to 25%.
So we were seeing actually 15.5%.
Okay.
Wow.
But if you include patients that no-show, these are the ones that, don't call, just kind of ghost you, that's 7.4%. So when you combine the two together, yes, you're looking at that 22, 23% of patients that don't show up for their originally scheduled appointment one way or the other.
Which is a high number.
It is. And that's where you can also be using that technology to be doing those text message reminders, email reminders. So I feel like email is going away. Do you guys feel that way too? I feel like everyone's just doing text messaging now.
Yeah.
So you need to have the two-way texting, available in your practices. You need to be able to, when you have that EOB come back in and that patient might owe a balance, to be able to like automatically send them out a text message reminder with a link to pay. It's just amazing to see how the trends are changing, how patient communications are changing, and really what the expectations are. And, there was so much other, great data that we were able to dive into. Let me ask you this, how many practices, like what percentage of practices do you think have maybe less than 20 new patients a month?
I would
Ooh,
say probably 40 to
I would say
40%.
it's a pretty big number. Yeah.
Big number.
You guys are absolutely right. So 41.2% of
Okay.
practices
Wow.
have fewer than 20 new patients a month. What was surprising to me is that there were 16% that had more than 80 new patients a month. Now, obviously, this is pulling from Denicon practice management, and we have some practices that are really huge, right? Or we have practices that are specialty. So everyone that's coming in might be a new patient,
New
for
patient.
that reason. So you have to look at, the reasons behind it. But on average, if you put everything together across all of the practices that we had, on average, it was a 43 new patients a month that were coming in.
Wow. Okay, that's good to know. Those are some really good trends. I think, one of the things we look at too is how do we compare? How do we stack up against other groups? Just so it's easy to kind of get into the, oh yeah, we're doing great, or no, we're doing very poorly. So it's really good to have those numbers in front of you.
And
Correct.
we're looking forward to really diving deeper into it for our 2026 report. We've already started working on it and putting together, the algorithms that are going to be able to pull the data. So we'll be able to split it down into, by specialty. So are we
Yeah.
seeing the numbers change if you're an oral surgery practice versus a general dentistry practice, if you're an orthodontic practice, a pediatric practice? So we're really looking forward to being able to give that kind of benchmark data at a level
Yeah.
that we really haven't seen in the industry before. And
Definitely.
yeah, and I mean, it really is so fascinating. We were looking at case acceptance, and one of the things that we came across very quickly is that pretty much every single dental group that we work with measured case acceptance a little bit differently. And what we found in looking at the data is that there were an awful lot of groups out there that were deleting, treatment plans that may not have been accepted. So when we ran the numbers originally, we had some practices that had like a 95% case acceptance rate. And, we talked to their DSO leaders and they're like, no, like absolutely not. And so it's really fascinating when you started like factoring in those kinds of behavioral changes that might be happening in the practices to get down to it. And when we were able to really cleanse and normalize the data, we saw that across, once again, general dentistry and specialty, that about 57% of treatments were accepted. And by accepted, we meant that in our system, they were marked as being accepted, scheduled, or they've been completed.
Mhm.
But when you dove down into then how many of those actually got completed, it was only 42%. So to get
Wow.
to that number, we looked at anybody that had been given a treatment plan between January 1st and June 30th of 2024 and had come in and completed that treatment sometime before December 31st.
Okay.
And that's when we were able to get to that. And, so it's 42% of
Wow.
treatment plans that were presented were actually completed.
Wow. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that whole thing. We have an associate
Mhm.
and we noticed that her treatment acceptance was higher than everyone else's. And we're like, why is that? Exactly what you said. We dove in. She just wasn't presenting treatment because in her mind, she was making assumptions that someone couldn't afford something. We're like, you have to stop that. You cannot diagnose somebody's wallet. You don't know what they value.
And to add to that, yeah, her treatment acceptance was showing really high. It was like 80% something.
Yeah.
Guess what? Guess why? Because she was doing mostly prophies and like one
Yeah.
filling at a time, right? When you start
Correct.
doing 1-2 dentistry or prophies, of course, it should be as close to 100%.
That's right.
Absolutely, that bread and butter dentistry. And, going to that idea about affordability as well. There's so many more options now than I feel like there's ever been before
Yep.
in order to help patients be able to afford their treatment. So I just was talking to a group that was using a financing company that I had never heard of before. But basically, it's like a second tier. So if the main, I think they used Care Credit as the first one that they would go to. But if they weren't approved by that, then they went to the second one. And they were able to then get the financing so that the patients could afford the dental care they need. I mean, there's so much innovation happening in the space right now.
There
It's
is.
amazing. It's
Yes.
amazing. I'm always, every day I'm blown away. I'm like, this new thing is there and they're bettering things. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's really fun. I mean, I get to talk to a lot of people in the industry, and I go to a lot of the conferences, and it is so much fun to see like what is happening out there right now and how innovative people are.
Yeah.
And that's one of the other things that's really cool. As the technology is evolving, it used to be that your practice management system would be like all in one, right? And it would be closed off. And that's where those team members would have to be opening up all of those other tabs in order to get the data that they needed. And now I feel like it's really changing. And it's much more about becoming that dental operating system, being able to have through APIs, that connection with those companies that are innovating faster than the main legacy systems might be innovating themselves. And I'm so excited about that. It's that transfer of data, being able to automate that, being able to get it back in so that your team members don't have to leave what they're doing. They can keep everything within the same ecosystem and be more efficient than ever before.
Definitely. Exciting times. So Beth, you've worked with dental groups of all sizes. What are some common challenges that you see DSOs face?
I think it's the same ones that you guys have seen at Area as well, right? It's scalability. How do you scale up? How do you standardize all of the systems and protocols that everyone is using? And then staffing. Staffing is still a challenge for so many groups right now. I talked to a group and they work with a very unique model. They work with a lot of Medicaid. They work with a lot of like underserved communities. And when they hire in for the front desk, they're having about a 60 to 65% turnover rate within the first 2 weeks. People are so overwhelmed when they come in. Hygiene is still a huge problem for many groups. And it's really fascinating. One of the other things that we dove into in the Dental Industry Outlook report was we talked to almost 25 dental industry leaders about what they're seeing. And some of the really fascinating things they were talking about is, the ADA, for example, has approved a couple of different resolutions to make it easier for foreign trained dentists to be able to do hygiene, for dental students that have passed their hygiene classes to be able to do hygiene. And now we're even seeing things like in Arizona, where dental assistants can have expanded functions to be able to do prophies. Highly controversial. There's a lot of, strong opinions about all of these different things. But, it's fascinating. I mean, there are reports out there that the ADA have done that says 30 to 35% of hygienists are planning to retire by 2030.
Wow.
So we really have to be looking at different ways to get more hygienists into the system. And we're seeing all different kinds of things. And I'm interested to see what you're seeing as well where you are. But we're seeing, a huge push now to increase the class size for hygienists so that the teacher to hygienist ratio is better, so that you can have more students going through classes at the same time. We're seeing a gig economy now where there's fewer full-time hygienists and instead hygienists are working part-time. And that really goes back to having standardized systems. So if you have a hygienist that is working maybe 2 days a week in this practice and 3 days a week in that practice, or however their schedule wants them to be performing, they know the systems, and that's easy to hop from one place to the other. One group, I think it's Aspen Dental, put into place that and actually it might not be Aspen, so I'll take that back. But one group put into place that basically an app. So if there had openings, right, where a hygienist called in sick or, just taking vacation time or something like that, they'd open it up to other hygienists that are in the same geographical area, and they could pick up extra shifts and go and work at that practice instead. So just so many different ways that people are getting innovative with the staffing right now in DSOs.
One of the things too we realized, and those are some really good points you brought up over the last 12 to 24 months, is the challenges in front office that you mentioned too, right, in staffing. We recognize that a lot of people were coming into dental with, sometimes you want to hire folks that have good customer service background, and you said something about they were turning over within 2 weeks, and we had our share of that too. And we realized that in dentistry, you've got to care, right? It's not like one of these jobs. You don't get to be unempathetic. You don't get to not care, right? And when you hold people accountable to a certain level of caring, then they quit on you because they're like, that's not what we are used to. And we found that to be a pretty big challenge.
It is so fascinating right now. I have 2 boys, they're teenagers, and they are so much more comfortable like looking down the phones and texting. And I mean, I never thought that I would have to be implementing a rule that says like no cell phones at the table, right? Like, put your phone down, like be engaged, make eye contact, have conversation. Right. And, my oldest is now a freshman in college, and he just joined the business fraternity this semester. And every single week, he has to have 5 coffee chats with either members of the fraternity or, business professors or other people that are on campus. And it has really taught him like how to engage with people, how to interact. And, I've never thought that those would be skills that you really had to like teach. And I'm finding that that is
Right.
absolutely what is happening right now. It is mind blowing to me, from the doctors all the way down to, your receptionist. It's really
Yeah,
amazing.
absolutely. Um,
It's a lot of fun though. I mean,
yeah.
I think that there's I think the pendulum will swing back again. I think people miss that, engagement and interactivity. I went out to dinner last night with a woman who is the mom of one of my other son's friends. And first time we had gone out, and we ended up talking for 3 hours. I mean, like,
Wow.
I can't even begin to tell you the last time that I went out to dinner with somebody and was able to just chat for 3 hours without stopping. I mean, it was just absolutely wonderful. So I think people are really craving
Hmm.
that, real connection again. And I do think that the pendulum is swinging back to that.
I agree. I think I saw an article pretty recently about how Gen Zers, they've never actually been in an office and now they're actually wanting to go in. So it was
Mhm.
interesting to see that.
There's no shortage of people, right? There's only shortage of people that actually want to engage with other people, to your point. And we've hired some folks who are like, I don't enjoy engaging with people, but they applied for a front office role. We're like, okay, I guess I'm not sure
It's
why you're
the
here
wrong
then.
role.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I mean, it is fascinating to me. I mean, absolutely fascinating to me. People's expectations. And I mean, we see this all the time, like, patients' expectations, right? I mean, on like what something might cost when they come into the dentist. They're constantly surprised. They're like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, how can that be? And you're like, this is something that is absolutely going to like let you be able to enjoy life,
Right.
and function. And same thing with people when they're applying for jobs. The idea that they might have to like dress up in like office professional clothes and not wear ripped jeans. I mean, it's just it really is mind blowing to me
Very
over and over
interesting.
again. Yeah.
But
Definitely. Beth, storytelling seems to be a thread throughout your career. How does that play into your current role?
No, it's really about identifying what challenges people are having and how to overcome them. And you know, I I've felt this for my entire career. People, we're all the same then at the core. And what we're dealing with is all the same. And so anything that we can do to be able to help people not feel alone, to give them the resources that they need to be more successful, to give them the support that they need so that they can thrive. That's really what feeds my soul. And so that is really the common thread, in everything that I have done, whether I was working in television news, I worked for a newspaper for a while, when I was inside the DSOs and telling stories. I mean, my favorite stories to tell were, those patient stories. So every day we would really push like Google reviews. And then I would every week accumulate all of the Google reviews that had come in and I'd share them out with everybody. And I had people tell me like that was their favorite part of the day, was reading through all of the happy comments that people had left about the difference that we were making in people's lives. So that storytelling, really goes through everything that I do and every place that I've worked in order to, help people be able to thrive at what they're doing and feel really good about it.
Yeah, I
right on.
absolutely love that. That's what it's all about, right? I think as practicing dentists, we actually just
Mhm.
clinically retired a couple months ago, but before that, that was our favorite thing was seeing patients being happy with the service that was provided. And now it's transitioned into helping other dentists accomplish that same thing.
Yeah.
We did a charity case. This is years and years ago when I was inside with the first DSO I worked in, and her situation been brought to our attention, and so we were able to do a full mouth, restoration on her. And her husband was serving overseas,
Mm.
and she was so embarrassed by the state of her mouth that she used to like hold her hand up in front of her mouth while she'd be talking to him
Oh.
on Zoom. Well, it worked in our favor because during the whole restoration, she wanted to surprise him. So she'd always talk, kind of covering up her mouth. And then it was, I kid you not, it was Christmas Eve and his regiment, returned back and he comes off the service bus and she's waiting in the audience. And we, of course, had, a camera there. We had some TV crews there, etc. And he sees her for the first time and she smiles. And I mean, like he just started
Yeah.
crying.
Oh.
The difference that we make in people's lives, just it gives me goosebumps. It really is so important.
Mhm.
And
And we talk about this all the time in our company too. It's not to be taken lightly, the difference we make, especially when front office folks who have not been in dental come. We tell them you're making such a big impact. That awesome phone call you answer is going to translate to this with this full smile. And this patient may not have laughed or smiled for like 20 years. You don't understand until you actually look at it.
Yep.
So that's a really good
Not to
point.
mention the health impact.
Correct.
Absolutely.
The confidence, the health, all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, being able to go and apply for a job, and feeling good about yourself, being able to eat
Great.
steak, right? I had a gentleman when I was working inside a DSO who left a review about how he got teeth whitening, and he was older. I mean, like, I don't know, late 70s maybe, and he talked about how he went home and saw his wife and how thrilled she was, that he had like this beautiful smile, and we see it all the time that people come in, not just because they might have emergencies, but because they have a special occasion that's going to be coming up, like a child's wedding or something else, and they want to look their best. And I mean, gosh, it feeds my soul every time we're able to make a difference.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's what it's about. So, Beth, we're going to do a quick lightning round. We're going to switch it up a little bit from our usual questions. First question, where do you go to learn?
So I love podcasts. So I've added yours, obviously, to my list. One of my favorite podcasts is the Dental Economist Show with Mike Huffaker, which is, through Planet DDS. If you're interested in, insurance, dental insurance, I definitely recommend Teresa Duncan's Nobody Told Me That podcast.
Great.
And then also we have a book club at work, so I learn a lot through that. We just finished reading Mel Robbins' The Let Them Theory.
So good.
That's where I go to learn is all of those sources.
That's amazing. What is your favorite meal?
So cheese fondue. We have a restaurant here called The Melting Pot, and now it's become a franchise. Before kids, I used to go to the Melting Pot so often that I was actually a taste tester for them. I absolutely love this.
Wow.
Yep. And so many of my important decisions in my life. I mean, my husband and I, we had our first kiss at a Melting Pot. I mean, I had my bridal shower at a Melting Pot. I mean, absolutely, cheese fondue is my favorite meal and also some of my favorite memories.
That's amazing. I think that's a very good selection, actually. But, it's funny. I always wanted to go to the Melting Pot. I've never been to one because my dad would say, why am I going to go pay to make my own food?
It's about the experience. It's about the experience.
Yep. So still have to make it out to one.
I think you need to come down to Tampa. I will absolutely take you to the Melting Pot.
Definitely. It's a plan. And last one, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
I think it would be the ability to make people feel better. It would be great to be able to read minds or, make money grow on trees. But for me, it's really about, helping people feel better. And not just if they're having a bad day, knowing what to say, because I don't feel like I always do. But also, I volunteer with children that have cancer. And so I would give anything to be able to make their lives easier and be able to take away what they're going through right now. So that... I think that's why we're all in the service industry, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what can we be doing to improve people's lives? And that's really what I love to do.
I love that. I think that's the first time I've heard that as a superpower. So that's amazing. Beth, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. It was just so great to talk to you, and the time flew by.
Feel the same.
Good.
I'm Dr. Anushka Gaglani.
I'm Dr. Abhishek Nagaraj. Thanks for checking out today's show and hope you can all join us again next time.
Thanks for watching this episode of Filling You In, where we uncover the insights, trends, and stories shaping the dental industry. If you like this podcast, please share it on your social channels and visit Aereo Dental Group on LinkedIn or on Instagram @Aereo Dental Group. You can also subscribe to the series and check out all of our episodes on this YouTube channel or at aerodental.com/podcast. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and let's keep elevating the dental field together.